If you have ever owned a Canon camera, you already know the truth most people figure out too late. The lens matters more than the body. Cameras come and go, but the right Canon lens can stay with you for years. And in 2026, these are the 10 Canon lenses that photographers are still searching for, still comparing, and still dreaming about. If you love stories about legendary glass and the gear that actually shapes how photographers work, subscribe to Alt Buzz Lenses. Now let us get into the list. At number 10, we have the Canon RF 50mm f1.8 STM. Small, affordable, and deceptively capable, this is the lens that quietly starts more Canon journeys than any other piece of glass in the RF lineup. Every great journey starts somewhere. For a huge number of Canon RF shooters, it starts here. This lens does not arrive with a red ring. It does not carry a flagship price tag. But what it does, quietly, reliably, every single time, is remind you why you picked up a camera in the first place. The 50mm focal length has a long history in photography. For a reason. It sees the world roughly the way human eyes do. Point it at a person, a street corner, a dinner table, or a window-lit bedroom, and the image feels natural, honest, real. And at f1.8, this small lens opens up enough to separate your subject from the background in a way that kit zooms simply cannot match. That soft, gentle separation is what makes people fall in love with prime lenses. And this is often the first lens that delivers that feeling to a Canon shooter. It is lightweight, compact, and fits the RF mount natively, meaning autofocus is quick and silent, smooth enough for video and fast enough for portraits. It is not luxurious. The build is plastic and wide open. It is not perfectly sharp in the corners. But none of that matters when you are just starting to understand light, framing, and what a single focal length teaches you about seeing. It may be the most affordable lens on this list, but for many Canon users, this is the lens that makes photography feel exciting again. At number 9, we have the Canon RF 35mm f1.8 Macro IS STM. Versatile, compact, and built for real life, this is the lens that fits every bag, every trip, and almost every moment in between. But Canon's most affordable lens is only the beginning, because this next one may be the smarter choice for photographers who want one lens to carry everywhere. There is something special about 35mm. It is not as tight as 50. It is not as wide as 24. It sits in this honest, natural space where the world looks the way it actually feels when you are standing inside a moment. Street corners, kitchen mornings, a child running across a garden, a friend laughing at a table. 35mm captures all of it without distortion, without drama, just life, framed beautifully. Canon built something quietly brilliant with this lens. The macro capability means you can get genuinely close to small subjects without needing a dedicated macro lens in your bag. The optical image stabilization built into the barrel means handheld shots in low light stay sharper than they have any right to be. And f1.8 gives you that soft background separation that makes casual images feel considered. This is not a flashy lens. It will never be the one photographers brag about at workshops, but it is the lens you reach for without thinking, the one already around your neck when the moment happens. This is the Canon lens for people who do not want to carry too much gear, but still want their everyday images to feel intentional. At number 8, we have the Canon RF 10-20mm f4L IS STM. Dramatic, wide, and built for the kind of images that make a viewer feel like they are standing right inside the frame. And if those two lenses are about intimacy, about getting close to people and moments, this next one is about something completely opposite: scale, space. The feeling of standing somewhere vast and making the viewer feel it too. 10mm is extreme. Most photographers spend their careers between 24 and 200mm and never feel like they are missing something. But then you stand inside a cathedral or on the edge of a canyon, or in the middle of a glass-walled modern building, and you realize that normal lenses simply cannot hold all of what you are seeing. That is where ultra-wide glass becomes less of a specialty tool and more of a creative necessity. Canon's RF 10-20mm carries the L designation, which means it is built for professional use, weather-sealed, optically refined, and designed to hold up across years of real work. Real estate photographers, travel filmmakers, landscape shooters, and architecture-focused creators have found this lens to be one of the most purposeful additions to the RF lineup Canon has ever released. It is not a lens for every shoot, but when you need it, nothing else will do. This is the lens for photographers who do not just want to capture a scene, they want to make the viewer feel surrounded by it. At number 7, we have the Canon RF 135mm f1.8 LIS USM. A portrait lens with real compression, real character, and the kind of background separation that makes every subject look like they belong on a magazine cover. The photography world talks endlessly about 85mm lenses, and for good reason. But there is a focal length that portrait photographers who have been shooting for years quietly return to again and again, 135mm. And Canon's RF version of that classic idea is something worth slowing down to understand. At this focal length, compression does something that shorter lenses simply cannot replicate. Backgrounds do not just blur, they dissolve. Subjects do not just separate from their environment, they emerge from it, fully, like the world behind them has been gently erased. The effect is cinematic in a way that feels effortless. Wedding portraits, fashion, editorial work, outdoor lifestyle sessions, 135mm at f1.8, renders all of it with a quality that makes images look more expensive than almost any other Canon lens available. Canon has a long history with this focal length. The old EF 135mm f2L was legendary, one of the most beloved lenses Canon ever produced, still talked about decades after its release. The RF version takes that legacy and rebuilds it for the mirrorless era. Faster autofocus, better image stabilization, sharper wide open, it is heavier than the lenses covered so far, and the price reflects its L-series standing. But for portrait photographers who want their work to feel polished and genuinely powerful, this lens delivers in a way that is very hard to argue with. If an 85mm lens feels intimate, the 135 makes portraits feel polished, cinematic, and expensive. At number 6, we have the Canon RF 200 to 800mm f6.39 IS USM. An enthusiast wildlife lens that brought 800mm of real reach to photographers who never thought they could afford to get that close. And before we continue, if you are enjoying this kind of lens storytelling, not just specs read off a page, but the real reasons photographers care about certain glass, subscribe to Alt Buzz Lenses right now. We cover legendary lenses, modern optics, and the gear that actually shapes how photographers work. Now, back to the list. For years, 800mm belonged to a very specific world. Professional wildlife photographers, conservation agencies, sports broadcasters, people with budgets and careers built entirely around long glass. It was never something a passionate bird photographer or a weekend aviation enthusiast could realistically reach for. And then Canon changed that conversation completely. The RF 200 to 800mm is not an L-series lens, and it is important to be honest about that. The build quality does not match Canon's red ring professional optics. The variable aperture, reaching as slow as f9 at the long end, means you will be pushing your camera's sensor in anything less than ideal light. These are real limitations, and photographers who buy this lens should understand them going in. But here is what this lens actually is. 800mm of real reach available to real photographers at a price point that would have seemed impossible 5 years ago. Birds in flight, distant wildlife, aircraft at air shows, the moon detailed and sharp against a dark sky. For years, 800mm felt like a dream reserved for professionals. This lens made that reach feel possible for real Canon shooters. At number 5, we have the Canon RF 100 to 500mm f/4.5 to 7.1 Li IS USM. This is Canon's red ring answer to wildlife and sports photography. A telephoto zoom that combines serious reach with the kind of professional build quality that makes photographers confident when conditions get difficult. And if that previous lens is about maximum reach at an accessible price, this one is about something different: trust. There is a reason the red ring on Canon L series lenses carries meaning beyond marketing. L glass is built to professional standards: weather sealing, optical quality, mechanical durability, and autofocus performance that professionals can depend on when the moment only happens once. The RF 100 to 500mm is all of that, wrapped around a telephoto zoom range that covers nearly every wildlife and sports scenario a working photographer will face. 500mm is serious reach. Combined with Canon's subject tracking and the lens's own optical image stabilization, getting sharp images of fast-moving birds, sprinting athletes, or distant wildlife becomes far more consistent than it has any right to be. The zoom range starting at 100mm also means this is not a one-trick lens. Tighter environmental portraits, stadium sports, and compressed landscape shots all fall within what this glass can do naturally. It is not the cheapest lens on this list by any measure, but it is the lens that wildlife and sports photographers reach for when they cannot afford to miss. The 200 to 800 gives you distance, but the 100-500 gives you the red ring confidence Canon shooters know. At number 4, we have the Canon RF 24 105mm f2.8 IS USM Z, a lens that broke one of photography's longest-standing compromises, combining the reach of a standard zoom with the constant brightness of a professional prime aperture in a single ambitious barrel. For decades, photographers have lived with a specific compromise. You could have a wide zoom range, something like 24 to 105mm, which gave you flexibility across almost any situation. Or you could have a constant f2.8 aperture, which gave you low light performance and background separation. You rarely got both in the same lens. Canon decided to change that. The RF 24 105mm f2.8L is not a small lens, and it is not a light one. But what it offers is genuinely remarkable: a focal length range that covers wide environmental work all the way to short telephoto compression, maintained at a constant 2.8 aperture throughout the entire zoom range. Consistent exposure, consistent depth of field, consistent creative control, whether you are at 24 or 105. For wedding photographers, this lens is extraordinary. Wide enough to capture the full room during a ceremony, long enough to isolate the couple during vows, bright enough to work in dim reception halls without flash. For documentary filmmakers and hybrid creators, the story is similar: run and gun shooting without the constant need to swap glass. The Z designation signals Canon's cinema-friendly refinements, making it a natural fit for creators who shoot both photography and video professionally. For years, photographers had to choose between reach and brightness. This lens is Canon trying to remove that compromise entirely. At number 3, we have the Canon RF 72 100mm f2.8 IS USM. The professional workhorse that photographers across weddings, sports, and events have depended on for decades. Now rebuilt, refined, and more capable than ever inside Canon's mirrorless era. There are lenses people want, and then there are lenses professionals need. The 70 to 200 f2.8 has lived in that second category for decades across almost every camera system in the world. Canon's RF version takes one of the most trusted professional focal length combinations ever made and quietly makes it better in ways that matter. The original RF version shocked photographers when it was announced. a 70 to 200 f2.8 that was dramatically more compact than its EF predecessor without sacrificing optical quality. The collapsing design meant it was genuinely portable for its class: weddings, concerts, sports events, corporate work, church ceremonies. This lens moves through all of it with a confidence that only comes from decades of refinement. The newer Z variant pushes things further toward hybrid professionals, with improved breathing control for video and finer electronic adjustments that cinematographers working alongside photographers genuinely appreciate. Whether you choose the original or the Z version, the message from Canon is the same. Here is a lens you can depend on when the moment cannot be restaged and the light will not cooperate. In the Canon world, a 70-200 f2.8 is not just another zoom. It is the lens that means work. At number 2, we have the Canon RF 85mm f1.2 LUSM. Heavy, expensive, and completely unlike anything else in the RF system, this is the lens Canon built for photographers who want their portraits to feel less like photographs and more like paintings. But before we reveal the number 1 lens on this list, let us talk about the lens that still carries one of Canon's deepest creative identities. Canon has always had a relationship with fast portrait glass that goes beyond engineering. There is something almost philosophical about the way Canon approaches its best portrait lenses. The idea that a photograph of a person should feel like more than a document. It should feel like a memory. The RF 85mm f1.2L is the fullest expression of that idea in the current RF lineup. f1.2 is extreme. The depth of field at that aperture is razor thin, and the optical challenge of making that razor thin plane of focus look beautiful rather than clinical is enormous. Canon answers it with a lens that is heavy, expensive, and slower to autofocus than more modest options. And yet, photographers who shoot with it consistently describe the rendering as unlike anything else in the RF system. The way out-of-focus areas melt, the way skin tones breathe, the way a subject's eyes hold sharpness, while everything else softens into something that feels more like a painting than a photograph. Canon did not build this lens for people who only wanted sharp portraits. It built it for people who wanted portraits to feel expensive. At number 1, we have the Canon RF 2870mm f2 LUSM. Bold, heavy, and slightly outrageous, this is the lens Canon built to prove that the RF mount was not just an evolution, but a statement. When Canon introduced the RF mount, the camera industry was watching. Every major manufacturer was trying to signal what their new system could do that the old one could not. Canon's answer was not a subtle one. It was a full-frame zoom lens with a constant f2 aperture, wider than any professional zoom the industry had seen at that focal length range. Heavier than most photographers would call practical, more expensive than most shooters could justify, and yet completely, undeniably exciting. f2 on a zoom is not just a number, it is a statement about what the RF mount's wider throat diameter and shorter flange distance make possible, engineering that Canon's older EF system physically could not accommodate in the same way. More light reaches the sensor, more subject separation is available across the entire zoom range. A wedding photographer shooting a first dance in a candlelit room can stay at f2, keep the shutter speed where it needs to be, and walk away with images that would have required multiple prime lenses to achieve a generation ago. The RRF 2870mm. f2L is not practical for everyone. It is large, physically demanding over a long shooting day, and priced firmly in professional territory. But practicality was never really the point. The point was to show what RF glass could become, to prove that Canon's mirrorless future was not just a refined version of the past, but something genuinely new. Portrait photographers, wedding shooters, event professionals, and creators who want a single premium lens that covers wide storytelling and intimate compression in one barrel have found in this lens something that is very difficult to replace: the RF 2870. f2 is the lens that made Canon's mirrorless mount feel dangerous. Heavy, expensive, and unnecessary for most, but it proved what RF glass could become. If this list helped you see Canon's lens line up differently, like this video, subscribe to AltBuzz Lenses, and drop a comment below telling us which lens you already own and which one is still on your list. We cover legendary glass, modern optics, and the stories behind the gear photographers actually care about. Every single week, Canon has built lenses for almost every kind of photographer alive. But the ones on this list are different. They are not just products. They are the lenses people save for, plan around, and stay loyal to Canon because of. Some glass gets forgotten, some glass gets famous, and some glass changes the way you see the world entirely. This is AltBuzz Lenses. We will see you in the next one.